Hi, everyone. Welcome to Surviving the Impossible, a panel featuring books from Random House Children's Books. We're so happy to have you here, and I'm just really excited to be able to chat with these four amazing authors. And I'll let them introduce themselves so they can give you the whole scope of what they're up to lately and what you can read from them next and what we're going to be talking about today. So why don't we start and just jump right in with Jennifer. Jennifer, why don't you get us going?
Hi, thank you. It's here. Jennifer Lynn Alvarez, and this is my debut YA thriller, and it's called Like Wildfire. And it is about five best friends who accidentally spark a gigantic, deadly wildfire and then lie about it. And as investigators sort of start to hone in on them, one of them wants to tell the truth, decides to tell the truth, and she goes missing. The other four become suspects in her disappearance. So that is my first book, and I have another thriller, YA thriller, coming out next September. This one comes out September 7th, and then I have another one coming out fall of 22, which is another thriller about a group of best friends as well, or a group of friends with a prank that backfires. Yeah, it's a prank that backfires, and the intended victims become suspects in a different girl's kind of the it girl's disappearance at the high school.
Wow.
So those are my books. Yeah.
Those kids have got a lot going on. They are.
Yeah, they do.
Are busy. Kester, what about you? What have you been working on lately?
What have I been working on lately? I just handed in the very much delayed sequel to my debut novel, A Court of Miracles, which is a reimagining of Les Miserables with a solid dash of the Jungle Book, but don't be confused, there aren't animals anywhere in it. So that was great. It's a 3-book series. Book 2 should be coming out sometime next year, I'd like to say, and book 3 soon after that. And yeah, that's what I've been working on.
Amazing. Lisi, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lisi Harrison, and actually I have been working on The Pack, which comes out today. Yes,
today.
Today.
Wow.
It's May. It's June 1st. Just that you're watching this later. It's June 1st currently. So congratulations.
Comes out.
It's a big day.
First, and it's about a school called Charm House. It's a private boarding school where girls are sent to tame their mysterious and magical animal powers. And when Sadie, the main character, who is a shy new student, learns that she has a very powerful animal light, she is invited to join the Pack, which is led by the school's popular It Girls. And, you know, life is supposed to get much easier after you are taken in by the popular girls, right? Wrong. Yeah. She's now dealing with friendship dramas and her crush on an off-limits boy, all while someone threatens to destroy Charm House and the Pack. So,
I mean, that's about what I was. That sounds like 12 years old for me. Like, that's exactly how I felt. So, Kenneth, what about you?
Well, I've been writing perilous books for quite some time, like Silverwing, all told from the point of view of bats, Airborne, swashbuckling stories set in airships rather than Spanish galleons. My latest work is a trilogy, which you can see behind me. There's Bloom, which is the first one, Hatch, the second one, and the third one just came out a couple weeks ago, Thrive. And it's a trilogy about 3 teens who are battling a series of invasions, ecological invasions of the planet. The first brings terrible carnivorous plants. These are really mean plants, you know, murderous plants. And the second book, Hatch, involves the second invasion of terrible things that hatch from eggs. And in the third and final book, you get to meet who is responsible for sending all these terrible plagues down on our planet.
Well, we have to get our hands on that very quickly then. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about these sort of thrilling situations and high stakes that are really present in all of your books. So I thought we would start just talking about sort of the general concept of stakes and how all of your books really bring these characters into situations that are like completely new to them, really just fully unknown. And I wondered what you guys think is appealing about that to a reader. Do you feel like it's more escapism, catharsis, and are those things that you really work to put in your books? And how does that register for you? So Kester, why don't we start with you?
I've got like shortest answer ever, because escapism, I suppose, maybe catharsis, I'm not sure, but it's not conscious at all. I think well, I suppose a lot of writers are like that. You just kind of write the story, and then if it happens to be cathartic as the author, and your little sister becomes convinced that the whole thing was about her, which clearly it wasn't, that's just a byproduct of it. That's that's just what I think.
And Lisi, I think I saw you nodding. Is that generally your response, or what do you think?
No, I just liked her answer. No, for me, I feel like I like to blend aspirational and then relatability. So creating, these fantastical worlds that are definitely not anything, like we all would love to have special animal powers. I can't relate to having special animal powers, but I can relate to the struggles that would come with those, like feeling different, wanting to belong, struggling to know your place in the world, those kind of things. So I just like to marry those two things.
Yeah, definitely. Jennifer, what about you?
Well, I honestly, since I got a smartphone, like however many years ago, my attention span, I have to admit, isn't the best. Like it was not as good as it used to be. And I just need that thrilling aspect I need a page turner for myself as a reader. And so I like the thriller aspect of like a survival story. And mine is a survival it's a thriller with survival aspects. But for me, it's escapism, but it's that thrilling, it's having a little bit of mystery and having very, very high stakes. It keeps me so invested that I just keep reading. And I feel like this is my first thriller, and I realize that that's pretty much all I read are thrillers these days, and just really super exciting stories because of my darn attention span since I got a smartphone. So I just think, and I think I've heard it a lot, even from other, from like my kids' friends and stuff, that they have struggled to read. So my goal is just to keep those pages just flipping.
Well, you accomplished it very well. So
I hope
you can
so.
check that off the list. Kenneth, what about you?
I feel like every story really starts with the character's life getting upended somehow. So what I like to do is create kind of a funhouse of terror, and then drop my character into it and see how they negotiate all the twists and turns. But I do tend to like stories where they're grounded in certain ways. Like there's a lot of fantastical elements to my stories, whether they're, told from the point of view of bats, or about weird giant wasp angel creatures, or Victor Frankenstein as a 16-year-old. But I find fantasy and thrillers go down a lot better if you feel a, connection to your characters. So I tend to like stories that take place in worlds pretty much like our own, just with, maybe one or two key, differences. It might be magic, it might be the fantastic, maybe some incredible element of danger that gets thrown into the mix. But those are the kind of thrillers I like to write and gravitate towards personally.
Yeah, definitely. And I like what you said about grounding the story somehow. And that kind of leads into my next question, which is for Lisi and Jennifer. And all four of your books do this to a huge extent. But I wanted to ask Jennifer and Lisi, you guys both are writing about these sort of group casts in a way where you have a group of friends and then these point of view characters and how they kind of go in and out. But they're also balanced with these giant external stakes. And so I wondered, how do you approach that? Does the internal inform the external? Do you sort of build one first and then build the other around it? I just would love to hear you guys talk more about that. So Jennifer, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So mine's 5 best friends. They've been best friends since they were 7. And definitely the internal is driving the external, because once they start the fire on accident, but there is, it's criminal to start a wildfire by accident. Actually, it's technically neglect. And once there are damages and possibly deaths, then there's criminal charges. So these kids just graduated high school and they have done all the hard work to get into college. A couple of them are going to college, a couple are not. And they were so afraid of just like what that would do to their friendship going to college. And then they start this fire. And now everything's on the line. Their college acceptances, their friendships, if they tell the truth, the whole town's going to hate them because half the town has burned down. People have died. 2 of them lose their own homes. And so there is so much pressure on them to keep this a secret and to not get caught. And because the teachers, their high school burned down. So it's like, they're going to be the most hated teens in Gap Mountain, where it's set, fictional town near Yosemite National Park. The fire even goes into the park, the national park, and it's killing animals. I mean, you don't want to be that kid that started that.
Absolutely not.
So, yeah, so they're definitely, all that's at stake internally is crushing them and just killing them. So yeah, that is definitely driving the story.
And I loved the way you had these sort of past relationships between the different kids kind of emerging in different moments where you're like, oh my goodness, this one moment has a ton of resonance in the fire storyline, but it also means a lot when you think about how these kids have grown up together and the sort of lingering hurts that they have. But actually no, go for it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and some unrequited love as well.
Yes.
There's a little bit of, romance stuff going on too. So
I'm curious, was that part of the original dynamic that you wanted to create, or did that kind of spring up on its own?
That sprang up on its own. Yeah,
Really?
once I had the cast, yeah, they how they related to each other just built with the story, and immediately they all just came to life, and kind of quickly they sort of fully formed, and and their past, was kind of just there. I just saw it sort of develop. That's what's fun about the page, is once you're into the page and you're writing, it just comes to life.
Lisi, did anything like that happen for you, or did you pre-plan?
Absolutely. I do agree that the internal informs the external. Well, I think actually you start with an external, which is, in my case, all these girls have these crazy animal powers. And then from there, the internal informs it, because what does each girl do with those powers, and how they each react to their gifts informs their behavior, which informs the plot. So, some girls are super proud of these and they want to go out in the world and be loud and proud, and are not worried about the dangers of how people are going to react to them. They don't care. I'm amazing. I'm stronger than any boy. I want to show off. Others are, no, I want to learn how to blend in so that nobody thinks I'm different. And all of those different dynamics, even in the pack friend group, just creates all of these tension. And that's what really drives this, is how each girl responds to the external internally. So
For sure. Yeah. Well, I would love to come back to that, but I was also curious for Kenneth and Kester. You guys are both, you're certainly not the only ones, but you're both working on series, and Kenneth, you've done a lot of work across series. And so I was wondering, how do you approach sort of escalating tension from book to book? And do you sort of view them as separate units? Do you look at them as like an increasing line? How does that change for you? Have you found your approach changing the more you work on a series? That's a lot of questions all in one, but I'm very curious. So Kenneth, why don't you start?
Typically, when I've written a series, I've written one book at a time and thought that was it. Not written a subsequent book until I had what I thought was a really strong idea. And I think that is the good, sane way to write a series. So the Overthrow series is unusual in that I foolishly imagined it fully formed as 3 books. And it was going to be so neat and delineated. The first book, killer plants; second book, killer bugs and insects; third book, whoever's sending the stuff down. It'd be a piece of cake. Of course, once you start, it becomes anything but. But in general, I mean, I find writing a series, it's a tightrope act, because with a sequel, in some ways it's easier because you've established your characters and your world, but you've gotten yourself in this situation where you want to, possibly raise the stakes or do something different, but not too different, because you don't want to alienate the readers who like the way you did it the first time. So you're trying to give everyone, the old familiar thrills, but, taking a new direction. So I find that quite challenging. In the case of the Overthrow series, I mean, the dilemmas and the the pressures just escalated, because the world's basically going to hell in a handbasket, with being taken over. So that sort of took care of itself. But the thing I had to watch out for is, the story, as I said, you want it grounded in the characters. So the characters are also changing and realizing they're part of this invasion in ways they didn't count on and don't really like. So that's how I went about, developing the series.
I'm curious, did you find that the end changed from the way that you first pictured that like perfect 3-book set?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the first book seems the clearest. The second book is okay. And the third book is just, a fog of, possibility. So yeah, I knew I had a vague idea what would be contained in the third book, but no, in writing the first and the second, and sort of like a Rubik's Cube, everything's changing, which is why I wanted to finish all 3 books before the first one even came out, just so I could have a chance to tinker with them all.
For sure, yeah.
All, fit.
Kester, what about you? You said you just turned in the second one. Are you going into the third one now and finding that it's matching up with what you originally pictured? Is it brand new? Are you in the fog, as Kenneth said?
Well, actually, book 2 was the fog. Book 2 is an absolute nightmare. It took me forever and I was so late on it. But the last thing Kenneth said really struck a chord with me. A long time ago, I was reading the blog of Joe Abercrombie, who's a British fantasy writer, writes for adults. And I think it was him. I hope it was him, not someone else. Could have been Mark Lawrence. I don't know. Anyways, he said exactly what Kenneth said. He said that he actually writes a whole series before he even sells it. And like you hear over and over again, agents and things saying, you mustn't do that, because if book 1 doesn't sell, you've spent, I don't know, 3 years writing a series, and there's nothing to show for it. But on the other hand, it's that control of the world that and that ability to kind of see things through, that if you do change something, you can like echo it and foreshadow and all of that. So that's ideally what I'd like to do. It's not what I've done. It's how I'd like to go forward.
Next time.
Yeah, no, I've got a middle grade series. I think I'm gonna do that with. Because it's much shorter. The word count is shorter. So I'm gonna just like write the whole 100,000 words and then chop it into 10,000 pieces. But as far as Court of Miracles goes, I don't know if it's because of the types of things I've loved to read my whole life. You kind of learn form from osmosis. I've always loved series and I've always read them, and I've always loved comic books and things, which have these massive like interlocking webs of stories and different like 5 series running parallel with one event running throughout them all. So I don't think I ever plan and think, okay, in book 1 it has to be like this and then it's got to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It just kind of happens naturally in my brain. And for Court of Miracles, what was great was that the central story started much smaller, in that it was a story about the whole book was inspired by me thinking, Cosette and Eponine, for those of you who know Les Mis, these are 2 young girls who live in this household with an abusive criminal, a violent man, and they grow up, and then years later they see each other and they look at each other once and say, oh, I knew her when she was young, and every other reaction they have to each other is just about how they're both in love with the same guy. And I was like, that's not how girls are. They might
surely you have more to talk about.
It's just like, that's not how women are, And I thought, so the story became 2 sisters. One is sold to a stranger when she's a child, and the other one is trying to find her and is haunted by the fact that she's disappeared. That was like the first premise of the idea. So we're talking about sisters, and yes, they might be in this massive criminal underworld, there might be a royal court and stuff, but the heart of the story is these 2 young girls trying to find each other and trying to protect each other from what turns out to be a human trafficker. So then it was kind of natural that in book 2, instead of one trafficker, there's a whole army of them. So automatically the stakes are getting escalated, but I didn't plan it that way. It's just the way it was. I was just like, well, that guy was so bad and so evil. What can we do? Let's bring 2,000 of him to the shores. And then book 3 is basically everything they know, everything they believe in, their allies, their family, the courts, everything around them. You just like pour gasoline on top of everything and set it on fire. So, but it just happened naturally. And I really, really believe that comes from even watching a lot of TV series. You just kind of like, I was reading a lot of the Discworld, for example, when I was very young. And I think these kinds of things just kind of like go into your subconscious. If you've consumed enough stuff that you love, when you start creating the stuff that you love, it just vomits out in that form.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love what you're saying about sort of the stakes naturally getting bigger, but you still have that relationship that you can always come back to and really ground it in. Kenneth, I'm going to keep coming back to what you said about that because I think it's so applicable to all of your work. But another question for all of you, and I'd love to start with Jennifer because I read your author's note, so I know you have like interesting things to say about this. I wanted to know, were any of these situations that you write about pulled in some way from your own life? Obviously, not all of them are going to be direct from reality, but were any of these sort of feelings pulled from something you experienced? Or if they weren't, did you have to do any really interesting research, or did you find yourself looking up things you didn't expect to? Jennifer, let's start with you.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I live in Northern California in Sonoma County, and we've just been plagued by wildfires the last 3 years, and they burned through the town south of me in 17, and then we had our town almost burned down in 2019, where we evacuated. It was a massive evacuation. It was like 200,000 people. And I'll tell you, when there's an emergency, there are not enough roads. There just aren't enough roads for the people. So you learn that really quick. So it's really scary because you're afraid of being trapped. And but these fires are, and then in 2020, we had a beautiful lightning storm, which we never get lightning in California, really, up here in Northern California. And everyone was like, oh, it's so pretty. And then like hundreds of wildfires started that night. And we were surrounded by our entire community was surrounded by multiple wildfires, and they were coming at us from every direction. And the whole state, it felt like it was on fire for the LNU complex. And it's terrible. It's horrible. And I've had friends lose their homes, and it's kind of like living near those movies where there's like a village and there's a fire breathing dragon who like lives nearby, and it just comes randomly and just sets everything on fire. That's what it's like living with these fires, is every day, especially when it's hot and windy and it's dry, we're just on pins and needles, just waiting for another fire to break out. We already had 3 last week, but they were small, thankfully. And it's just like, even when it's windy, a lot of us get PTSD. We just start to get scared. And the thing about a wildfire is it weaponizes the land. So a wildfire, it starts as a spark and it grows into a monster like really quickly, especially if it's windy. It's just feeding it. And then it dries out everything ahead of it, and it shoots embers like when it's windy, like a mile ahead of the fire. So it's starting fires in front of it as it's coming, and it's creates its own weather. It creates tornadoes. It's thrown firefighters into trees. That was in my book, but it's a true story. And then pine cones are full of sap, and they fall and they roll like down hills, and they drop sap, and then that catches more fires. And then someone imported eucalyptus trees to our area, and eucalyptus trees burn inside, and they burn and burn and burn, and you can't tell that they're on fire. And then they explode, and they shoot these bombs, fire bombs, for miles in every direction. So we had eucalyptus trees exploding, and it was just, it's crazy how the fire weaponizes the land. And so that's why like fire retardant is a pretty good, it's almost better than water, because it's so hot that water just evaporates. So anyway, they're terrifying. I have to say, there's nothing scarier to me than fire. It feeds itself, it grows itself, it travels. They travel 3 football fields a second. And then the humans look so small against these 100-foot flames. They bring in these airplanes and fire retardant and hoses and hundreds, thousands of firefighters and inmate firefighters, and they can't stop it, and they just burn for weeks and weeks and weeks. So anyway, it's needless to say, I have a little experience, and it was very cathartic to write about a fire. I got to start it, I got to tell it where to burn, and I got to put it out. And I really enjoyed that aspect of writing the book. I felt like, I don't know, it was kind of just a healing thing. But I also interviewed a fire battalion deputy chief and and an investigator for the district attorney's office for San Francisco, because I also have the missing person case.
Right,
So I
yeah.
needed to talk to the police. Yeah. And I needed to talk to the fire department. And that's where I had put in personal experience into the story, but also I did research so I could make sure the facts were pretty much correct. If I made a mistake, it's my fault. But overall, when you read the story, it's a thriller. It's meant to entertain you. I want you to be on the edge of your seat and having fun and like thinking, would I tell the truth or would I lie? So it's not an essay or a memoir. It is a full-on action-packed like thriller. But I got to pour real life experiences into it, and that was really great for me. And a lot of the people, the actual victims in the book, not who died, but who lost their homes and stuff, that was all from people that I know, so personally. So yeah, it means a lot.
Well, thanks for sharing all that. And I agree, you definitely achieved the entertaining, but I also felt like I learned a lot about, like, I didn't know that that it was criminal to even start a wildfire by accident. So I learned a lot, but also had a great time, which is a weird thing to say about a book about a wildfire. But Kenneth, what about you? Did you do any fun research or find yourself going down a weird Wikipedia hole?
Always. Yeah, I do a ton of research because the things I write about are so far outside of my personal experience. I'm thankful for. With the Overthrow series, I actually talked to a botanist who, told me a lot of interesting things about plants and what sort of violent creatures they can be, sort of waging chemical warfare on each other under the soil and communicating through a fungal network. And just looking at stuff we have on the planet that does shoot its seeds or eat things and dissolve them in enzymes, or drink creatures by plunging its nose into them and liquefying them. So like if you're in a hurry to find terrifying creatures, you can look at things right around us and just sort of magnify them, amplify them, cannibalize them in certain ways. So that's always been my sort of modus operandi for my books.
And Lisi, I saw you nodding. Did you also find yourself on pages you maybe didn't want to be on?
Well, I'm just so glad that you picked Kenneth to follow Jennifer and not me. Because it's like, I do not know how to follow that answer, unless I completely make up the fact that I was born with like a hyena living inside.
We're learning so much about you today.
Oh my God. So yeah, my answer is a lot less intricate, but I was not born with animal powers. Okay. But I was sort of, I'm just drawn, the thing that I drawn from my reality is, I guess I've always looked at life through a slightly different lens than the people I was surrounded by. I went to a private Hebrew school for 9 years and always felt a little sheltered and a little not like everybody else. And when you're in those years, you want to be exactly like everybody else. And so I've just always thrown all of those feelings into all of my books. And I think I've just always been teetering between loving the things that make me different and resenting the things that make me different. And that's just something that I think many of us struggle with. So that's what I drew on. And then I did research some animal traits, but so yay for me.
Well, I thought you did a great job. So, and now we know that you do not have hyena powers. So we've really
just lion powers.
Very disappointing.
Oh, okay.
Very disappointing.
I know, you're not the first.
Well, I thought we would actually talk about characters a little bit, and how you ended up choosing the points of view that you worked in, because we have, I think some of you are writing in single point of view and some of you are working with double. And so I'd be so interested to hear, like, did you pick the characters based on the situation you were writing about and say, okay, I need these people, or did you really come into it character first? And Kester, I'd love to start with you.
Well, I think I always do character first. It's just what happens. The main character of Court of Miracles is Eponine, and I have had like a lifelong struggle every time I watch any version of Les Mis, because she has so much potential and she's just relegated to being in love with this dude and then dying for this dude who is the worst. Marius Poor Mercy is the biggest excuse. I mean, it's just rubbish. So I think as I had said before, it came from that idea that, you know, when you're a little girl living in an era where living in a society, in a family where everyone is a criminal, and you see your little sister getting sold to a stranger, what's the first thing you think has happened to her? And you're so traumatized by that the trauma of it never lets you go, and it haunts you for the rest of your life. And that's where the story was born. In fact, it actually changed quite a bit from what I'm describing. But the first time I saw Eponine, she was hanging off a roof, and she was exhausted and in the rain. It was almost like a clip from a film, which I don't see in my books like this at all, but it just came to me. And she was exhausted and wet, and she was searching every window in the whole city of Paris, looking for her sister that had been stolen from her in her spare time, when she wasn't, you know, having to do thefts and burglaries for the Thieves Guild. And so she was just there. And then I came up with the rest of the story, and it did actually evolve a little bit from that. But I found that everything I write, it's always like that. The main character is, and the story just kind of like mushrooms out from around them. And I wrote in first person, and I hated it, but I did it because I had read a lot of advice that young adults should be written in that way. And it was for a long time, almost entirely in that way. And I think that trend has started to move in the last few years. But I mean, this was almost like 4 or 5 years ago now. I hated it, and I don't think I would ever do it again, because I'm from the generation where everything was written in third. So I've only ever read in third, and suddenly I had to write first.
Well, you pulled it off super well. So could not tell that you didn't like it. Jennifer, what about you? Did you have a similar sort of image first moment with a character, or did you build sort of backwards or like outside in?
Yeah, it started with just the idea of I wanted 5 friends, or I wanted a group of friends. It actually started with a group. There were originally 6, and one of them got written out, sadly. But yeah, it happens. But it started with wanting this group of friends that had this long history together and had been friends for a very long time in a small town. But I knew I had to pick a POV character. And so out of the 5 that I ended up with, you know, I knew like I needed to pick the one who had the most kind of at stake. I mean, they all have pretty much equal stakes, but her name is Hannah. And the difference with Hannah Warner is that her dad is the sheriff of the town that half of it burned down. So, and he's helping CAL FIRE investigate the cause of the wildfire. So she's living with someone who's also, you know, her own father, who's kind of hunting her down unknowingly. So I thought out of the 5 teens, she was the most interesting one to tell the story, because of living with the sheriff, her father, and also because she knows the most about why it's so serious what they did and how much trouble they could be in. So she's you know, able to really explain to her friends, like, this is serious. And so yeah, so I think the stakes were just highest with her, and then the friends sort of built around her. So there's 3 girls and 2 boys. It was 3 and 3, but yeah. So 3, yeah, and so they're her friends, and I think that finding the most tension was why I picked Hannah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love that everybody in the book is lying, but she's lying to her dad, which is the extra sort of line that she has to cross. Lisi, what about you? How did you go about choosing your points of view?
I fell in love with the idea of this creepy convent turned boarding school that was sort of part of every bit of town lore. Like, kids would go knock on the door for Halloween and scramble. Like, it's the place rumored, like, where bad girls go, and like, do we ever hear from them again? And I just loved that. Like, I wanted to know what is going on in that convent turned boarding school. And so I sort of came from that place. I started with that. And then, who do I want to be my guide to go in there and figure all that out for me? And so Sadie, it's told from Sadie Sampson, the main character's point of view, 3rd person, by the way. And she is the biggest fish out of water. She has a lot of power, but is a very shy, tormented human being with zero confidence. And so she has the biggest arc, the most to learn and grow and struggle with. So we're sort of riding on her back throughout this whole thing, because I feel like that's how most of us would be. Like, she sort of represents everybody with her curiosity and the struggles and all that. So started with the place and the mystery, and then who do I want to be my guide through that?
Yeah, I had 3 point of view characters because they're all changing in different ways, and they react very differently. So I'm very happy as a writer if I have 3, if I can have 3 people in a room who all want different things, because then there's lots to argue about, and there's lots of tension between the characters. And as much like peril and physical, stuff as I pack into my books, because they're adventure stories at heart, I think I'm happiest when, it does come down to the characters, because that's where the real drama is. It's not big robots hitting each other, planes blowing up. It's about, people wanting different things. And I find that that's very dramatic for me. So in the case of the Overthrow Theory series, it was, I just chose basically they're ugly duckling stories. They're kids who feel like misfits. They feel weak, and they get an opportunity to be strong and discover what is strongest about themselves. I personally find that a very satisfying story to tell.
Thank you for covering for me. I disappeared for some reason, but I know we're coming up on the end of time, so I figured we would just do like 2 rapid fire questions. And I'd love to hear a book recommendation from all of you guys, something you loved recently or looking forward to, anything like that. So let's start with Lisi.
Oh God, you're not going to want to hear this, and it's totally off point, and I'm just going to be honest because it's what I'm reading right now. It's called Unwinding Anxiety.
Is it working?
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to stay afloat here. It's very good if anybody has anxiety.
I'll write that down.
Clearly it's working really well. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I mean, practical. I love it. Perfect. Kester, what about you?
The last book I read is, I think it's the current favorite series that I'm reading, is Jodie Taylor's Chronicles of St. Mary's. That's the name of the series. I cannot for the life of you tell you what the last one was called, because I just get it delivered on my Kindle and I just breathe it, and then that's it, and I wait for the next one. But it's absolutely amazing. Historical time travel. It's like a mix between Doctor Who but without any aliens or anything. It's just brilliant. Everyone needs to read it.
And there are many in the series, so it'll be covered for a while. Just perfect.
Exactly, there are.
Kenneth, what about you?
I really liked this one, Fabulous Ed Watson by Basil Sylvester and Kevin Sylvester. It's about a non-binary tween on it. It's an amazing literary scavenger hunt with America. It's just a ton of fun, and it's just so good-natured, and the main character is just so lovable that it was just a pleasure to read.
Amazing. And Jennifer, what about you?
Well, funny, I just read Dry by Neil Shusterman.
Good one.
And talk about another disaster book. So it's California out with no water. California runs out of water, and it takes place in Southern California, Lisi, and it is just terrifying. The tap goes dry, and that's it, and they're out, and it's about these kids trying to survive it. And yeah, it's pretty. It was fun. It was interesting. But then we got this huge drought. This drought warning, or I think we're in a state of emergency for drought. And so it's not so funny.
Sitting close to the bone.
Yeah, a little too close. Yeah.
Read Dry and then read the book about anxiety, and then you'll be covered.
Yes, I think I need.
We got you covered.
Right.
Yeah, I need to stop reading these books and maybe
Stick with me.
try that one. Yep.
Well, before we go, why don't we I'd love to hear what's coming next for you guys. Some of you already touched on this at the beginning, but it would be great to have a reminder. What's coming next, where we can find you. And as a reminder to anybody watching, you can buy any of the books mentioned from your favorite retailer, indie bookstores, B&N, what have you. They're there, available for purchase. Go check them out. Before we say goodbye, just a quick where we can find you and what's next. Kenneth, you want to start us off?
Ghosts, haunted lighthouse, really terrible ghosts, and a teen, sort of a hapless teen who does ghost tours and gets snared in this centuries-old struggle.
Ooh, that sounds great. Kester, what about you?
You can find me at kestergrant.com. And what am I working on? Well, Court of Miracles 2 should be out next year. I think it's just come out in softback. Is that what you call it in America? I'm not sure. I'm not American, as you might be able to tell. I'm actually working on an animal fantasy that who knows when it's going to come out because it's super delayed, which is about monkeys. And I'm actually a big fan of Kenneth Silverwing. I thought it was amazing. So it's kind of like the book I've written, Golden Port, is like Jungle Book on speed.
Nice. Lisi, what about you?
I am currently writing the second book in the Pack series called Law and Order, and then
Oh my God.
that should be out. I don't know, like next year if I can finish it. And I also have a series out right now called Girl Stuff, and the second book, Crush Stuff, is going to be out in the fall of this year.
Amazing, and congratulations again on your release. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
And Jennifer, what's next for you?
So the next thriller is called Friends Like These, and it is also set in Northern California, but this one's going to be in a small beach town, and it's about that prank that backfires and the victims become suspects, and that'll be out in fall of 22. And if you want to find me, I'm at jenniferlynnalvarez.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for being here, and I'm so glad that we could learn more about your books and about all of the high stakes that are waiting for readers inside. Thank you everybody for watching. And as a reminder, you can find any of the books mentioned at your favorite retailer, and they are really good. I got the chance to read them all, and I'm really happy about that. So join in, grab a copy, and thank you so much for coming. So
thank you.
bye everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.